Oh, hey, we're live.
I think we
Cool.
are live.
I
Yeah.
think we are live. Dr. Dan Stickler, how you doing, sir?
Doing great, Keith. How about yourself?
I am doing fantastic. I am back from all my worldly travels and have feet firmly planted in Austin for a while. So, yeah, I feel good. I feel
Uh,
great. I love traveling, but traveling does not necessarily like me.
I wish I could say the same about being firmly planted here in Austin, but it's just things constantly coming up. So
You know what? You are changing the world, Dr. Stickler. I mean, you're going all over, you're educating people, spreading the fine word of, well, everything. You've become a go-to expert in peptides, which I think is fascinating. Um, but we're here today to talk more about the genetic side of things. We'll leave the peptide talk to another awesome discussion sometime down the road. But today, let's talk about genetics.
all
And
right.
I should back up this a little bit for people who don't know who Dr. Dan Stickler is. Dr. Dan Stickler is the co-founder and the chief medical officer of Puron Academy, and I personally work with these fine people, and they are amazing, amazing. Think functional medicine taken to a new level. I mean, the work these people do is just fascinating, and I'm blessed to be able to be a part of this group. It's fantastic work you guys do, Dan,
I appreciate that.
you and your team. Um, so today, Dan, let's talk about genetics. And I think it's in lay circles, we like to say that genetics loads a gun and epigenetics pulls or does not pull the trigger, as the case may be. And that might be a good way for a layperson like myself to think about it. And let's just kick it off by saying, is that a correct way to think about the play between genetics and epigenetics?
Yeah. Well, barring the violent aspect of the description,
We are in
yeah.
Texas,
Well,
so
Micro does not like that kind of
right,
terminology.
right,
So,
right,
what we like to look at it as is that the genetics is the hardware, and the epigenetics is the software that's added on top of that to really express. And that's where most people don't realize how much control we have over gene expression. And this is the area that we focus on is in training coaches and clinicians in learning the epigenetics piece along with the genetics piece. I saw an article, a couple articles that have come out in the last several weeks that they were talking about direct to consumer genetic reports, and they were saying it's like reading a horoscope or it's palm reading, essentially that. And there's two extremes. There's the people who take genetics as the absolute, and then there's the group that says it's absolutely useless. And the
right.
answer is it's neither one of those. It's in between. And when we get genetic tests, I don't think most people realize that we're not looking at mutations. 23andMe, any of these other like our tests, all of these are looking at what we call single nucleotide polymorphisms. There are 10 million of these in our genome, and the other 99.5% of our genome is essentially identical in every person in the world. And it's these 10 million base pairs that we call polymorphisms. And the polymorphisms are not mutations. I mean, people talk about MTHFR and ApoE as mutation. They're not mutations. These are variants in the type of base pairs that we carry that can change expressions, but they have been developed because of ancestral exposure. And there's usually a benefit to the reason that they're there. I mean, our DNA is an extremely intelligent molecule, and it's not going to create something commonly that is detrimental to the health of the individual. But what it means is that we need to adjust our lifestyle to match that ancestral mix that we carry. And this is where people go awry. I mean, the direct to consumer tests that give you a report without really understanding who you are, not really actionable. And a lot of people will get those and they'll be like, oh, geez, this isn't me at all.
Right.
And so what we do is we have a genetic report, and we do have outcomes in those reports, but those outcomes are malleable. And what I mean by that is that we do not supply reports without providing an epigenetic coach to actually interpret it with you while they're going through the report. And you've been through this, so you know what these
Right.
reports look like, and how it's not an absolute outcome that we're looking at. We're looking at ways that we can adjust lifestyle, or even enhance lifestyle to a point where it can enhance the expressions of certain genes.
And I don't mind using myself as an example of the process that you guys go through. So there is a genetic testing, yes, but there is the counseling, and the counseling is very, very important. In my own case, take the genetic test, and oh, by the way, I come back with the APO3/4 allele,
Yeah.
which is rather ironic given that I'm the paleo guy, right? So
Right.
can you explain that particular allele just a bit?
Yeah, so ApoE is a it transports fats, codes for a protein that transports fats, and typically in a high saturated fat diet, you can increase neuroinflammation, you can increase the risk of plaque formations in the heart. There's a bunch of things that ApoE can do, but ApoE also has benefits to it. So when you're carrying a 4 allele, it's not that it's a bad thing. It's actually developed for a good reason. And one of the things it does is it protects you from infections. And so there is a benefit there. So if you're in an environment where you have low exposure to saturated fats and high exposure to viral illnesses in particular, you can derive a benefit from that.
Mm.
So in your situation, you are carrying a 4 allele, and it's not the scenario of the real extreme, which is the 2 4 alleles.
Right.
You have 1 4 allele, but an easy way to modify that, and you can. That's the thing. Diet is not fixed. I mean, if you're dogmatic about diets, I mean, you've probably taken the wrong path.
Right.
You've got to look at the diet that's best suited for the individual, and it doesn't always mean that we can predict that. We just have a high probability. So in your situation, we would say, yeah, you love the paleo diet, you love to eat your meat and everything like that, but let's keep the saturated fat on the lower side. I mean, we've even had some of the keto experts that came in and they were 4/4s. And so they had double 4 allele. And with them, what we do is we say, it's fine. You can stay keto, but we're going to put you on a more Mediterranean style keto,
Right.
where the fats are derived from other sources rather than from the saturated fats. So the diet can be adapted to usually the individual's preferences. It's not a problem.
Right. And that's very, very good information to know. And I don't know that someone would be able to derive that kind of information without proper counseling to go along with it. And most people wouldn't, I would
Right.
imagine. Right.
And there's other genes that are involved in that. I mean, you've got the PPAR gamma, you've got the ApoA2, you've got the ApoA5. So you've got to look at the big picture, not just, oh, you've got this one thing and this is going to create this one outcome. I mean, you're talking about 2 base pairs to predict ApoE status out of what, 3 billion?
Right.
That's a very small
Right.
number that you're dealing with. So you want to look at the bigger picture, and you also want to look at life history.
Right.
What do your labs look like? What is your cholesterol like based on the diet that you're currently eating? And all of these things need to be taken into account. I look at genetics as another metric. It's not a absolute. So, it was like when I first started doing genetics, it was like, oh, you've got an MTHFR variant. You have to get on methylfolate and
Mm-hmm.
SAMe. And, you're going through this whole scenario of going, okay, this is the biochemical pathway. Here's where the genes are involved in that. It doesn't work that way. The human system is a very complex system, and you've got to look at the big picture of everything rather than the individual piece.
Right. And the lifestyle part of it was it's pretty easy fix, really. I just shifted my diet. I whined and cried for the first day because, oh my God, I can't have brisket every day of the week. But I mean, I shifted my diet, and just that subtle shift. I mean, I don't know if you talked to Ryan or saw my last blood work, but my lipid levels just plummeted. I mean,
Yeah, and we
just
see
a
that
small,
routinely.
right.
Yeah. And that's what we follow. I mean, it's not about just putting you on this, but it's about what happens next?
Right.
Look at that progression. Does this change reflect what we expect it to reflect? And we look at that in the blood panels. We look at it in how you feel, your energy levels, your stress scores, all of that. So anytime an intervention is done, you want to follow it up. You want to have what we call key performance indicators.
Mhm.
Is this consistent with what we expected to see? If it's not, then let's step back and reevaluate things.
Right. And Dan, and I know you've heard this so many times before, but we use Angelina Jolie as like the example of what not to do with genetic information, right?
Right.
So,
And her situation is a little bit different because she did carry the BRCA mutation.
right,
Okay, this is occurring in less than 1% of the population. And you can look at it and say, okay, well, this genetics that she carries gives her this higher probability. And you can, depending on the BRCA mutation you have, it can be pretty substantial. I mean, up to 70% risk. But what people also don't realize is that you can actually mitigate that risk through lifestyle. I mean,
right,
something as simple as breastfeeding for a cumulative period of 1 year can reduce that 70% risk by almost 30%. You can
right,
do breastfeeding for a cumulative period of 2 years, you can reduce it by 50%. And then you have other lifestyle factors. So you can gradually whittle that risk down through lifestyle
right,
factors. And this is what our coaches understand is how lifestyle can impact this stuff. Now, that kind of stuff with the BRCA and all that needs to go through a licensed clinician. But we do have epigenetic health coaches that will do other lifestyle factors that aren't related to medical diagnosis and treatment necessarily.
right. And one thing I found very, very helpful with your team was so this particular APOE34 allele also predisposes those who have it to dementia, Alzheimer's, and things of that nature, compounded in my own case with the fact that I played football for so many years and in the off season did kickboxing. So I did myself zero favors early on. But being able to work with your team can help me now mitigate any possible damage I did back in the day, and we can navigate through that. So changing the diet, yes, but also monitoring brain function, using some selected peptides to be able to fix any issues that may be cropping up. So that's
Yeah, and
very
that's
as well.
that's the really high end stuff.
Right.
We get to draw in all of these additional markers for somebody like you, where we can actually look at where the brain is in the current state, what we can do to change that. We can monitor those outcomes over time. So everything that we have. I mean, the human system is amazingly malleable, and it's malleable through diet and exercise and meditation and stress reduction and cognitive processes. So it's all there. And, in your situation, with an ApoE34, yeah, you have an increased risk of Alzheimer's, you have an increased risk of heart disease and all of that. But that is all stuff that can be mitigated.
Right.
You do it through lifestyle and you can bring it down to almost a average or less than average risk of developing those things, even though you carry the higher probability of developing it. But yeah, if you didn't exercise and you ate just a really high saturated fat diet and all of this, yeah, you can. I mean, with 2-4 alleles, you can be 30 times the average risk of developing Alzheimer's with that. So yeah, we really consider all of the aspects of it, and our coaches are well versed in the lifestyle component, and they're certainly not going to tell you that you're at risk for Alzheimer's or anything like that. What we're going to talk about is the actual aspects of it, like neuroinflammation.
Right.
We're not going to talk on disease or anything like that. And diseases they're just terms. What's the mechanism behind the disease is what's important. And this is what our epigenetic lifestyle coaches can really help with when you get your report.
Right. And so walk me through, let's say someone decides to purchase, and by the way, we'll have a link in it wouldn't be the show notes, it would be the discussions. trying to get my platform right here. And we'll have a link to the option to buy. But Dan, talk us through, if I am someone who is interested in this, what does it look like? So I buy the kit, and then
Yeah, so we have a special offer that we're offering for the Paleo FX community. It's our kit. So you get your kit, which will give you 746,000 SNPs in it. So it's one of the largest SNP arrays on the market. So you get your kit. It's a cheek swab. It's not a spit test or anything like that. And once those results come back, which is generally 2 to 3 weeks, then you will be set up with an epigenetic coach. And that coach will get on a 1-hour call with you to review a 45-page report or an 80-page report. So we have the entry-level report is nutrition, supplementation, and sleep. And that's over 300 genetic variants that we're looking at with that test. And that report will come back, 45-page report. You will sit down on a video call with your coach, spend an hour going through that report, interpreting those results with you so that you actually get some actionable information out of it. And that report is typically, I think, $649. And through this special offer through Paleo FX, it's going to be $397. So it's over $250
right.
reduction. Now, if you want to go with the 8 report, which adds on environmental health and detoxification, athletic performance, and hormones, that's an 80-page report. You get 2 hours with a coach. And that one is running, I think, $647 right now, and it's normally $949.
Mm-hmm.
So it's $300 off of that package. So some really amazing offers that we've put out there for the paleo community, just for the holiday season. I mean, what a great gift to give the gift of health.
Right,
and,
right.
Everybody really loves the results of these reports, and our coaches, you can select from physicians in different specialties, chiropractors, naturopaths, health coaches. I mean, we have such a variety of coaches that you can actually select from. You're not necessarily assigned unless you don't have a preference, but we have a full spectrum of coaches out there.
And it is a thorough discussion. Let me just tell you, it is full on, but yet it's actionable, like you said. I mean, I walked away with, yeah, there was a ton of information, and there was a lot of it that I was just like, okay, I'll have to noodle on that. But I walked away with very actionable steps. I mean, the moment I left, I happened to do it in person just because I'm in Austin, but I walked out of the office with very actionable steps of how can I change and better my life and optimize my life, because I'm all about that. And you are too, Dan, which is
Yep.
why I love working with you guys. It's not just let's get you to a base level of health and okay, you're good to go. It's okay, now you're at a good level of health. Now, how do you want to optimize?
Right.
How do you want to optimize this machine that we're all floating around in? And the steps were actionable.
And it's not about just getting rid of disease. I mean, I don't like that model of disease care where it's like, oh, you come in, you're sick, and you have to get better, but because that's an end point. What we look at is how can you continually be better over time? And so you can come in entering in the realm of being sick, or what we call out of homeostasis, and then you get balanced, and then you continue to move forward. So it's a nice progression as opposed to disease versus non-disease.
Right. And I don't think Michelle will mind me saying this, but I kind of snickered to myself. So Michelle went through this process before I did. And I kind of snickered to myself when she came back and she said, you will not believe what I'm going to have to give up because of my genetic testing. And I was like, oh, that's too bad for you, as I'm eating my brisket. And then come to find out a few months later, I go through it. I'm like, okay. I guess
that's a bit of irony in that. Yeah.
Right. So the two people who co-created Paleo FX, both of us have to be on and I don't say have to be, we choose to be right. on a Mediterranean keto diet, and both of us are all the better for it.
Yeah. And I tell you, Mediterranean keto has some of the best outcome results across the board for people. I mean, it's an amazing dietary pattern.
It really seems to be, and it may be as we move further along in this paleo path, it may be that is the default diet,
Yeah.
right?
I've actually got the textbook on the Mediterranean diet right here. But it talks about all the evidence-based approach behind it. And they actually mentioned the ketogenic version of it in the book in great detail, talking about the epigenetic modifiers of all the phytonutrients and everything that comes in the diet. So I really am a big fan of the Mediterranean diet, and especially the ketogenic version of it.
Right. I mean, it certainly couldn't hurt anybody to be on that diet for sure. But if you happen to have a genetic predisposition like Michelle and I do, of course, it's more imperative.
Right.
But I can tell you, we don't lack in taste or variety or anything like that. It's a fabulous diet, really is.
Absolutely.
Yeah, fantastic. What are some of the other common genetic predispositions that your team faces?
We'll see a lot of people with what we call GAD1 variants, which a lot of people will mistake that for non-celiac gluten sensitivity when it's actually a glutamic acid sensitivity. And that's just modifying the diet. It's not a matter of just getting rid of gluten and dairy. You've also got to look at glutamic acid sources in the diet. And so people will get rid of gluten and dairy, and they'll feel 50% better on that, and they'll think that done the right thing. But when you really start to mitigate most of the glutamic acid sources, all of a sudden you're like, wow, okay, I had no idea I could feel this good. So we have that. We have the sleep genetics, which is really about getting around your circadian rhythms. We have the supplementation genetics, which, we used to do a lot of micronutrient panels and things like that on our clients, but we found that the genetics was really a better guide for supplementation patterns for people. Just because it says you have a propensity to be deficient in this, you have a propensity to need this form of this vitamin and all of that. So it's really, really nice to be able to look at your own blueprint and see what your probabilities are. And you notice I don't say absolutes, it's that probability piece.
Right. Well, we're really getting closer and closer and closer to being able to really dial in a personalized diet supplementation peptide regimen for somebody. When I think back to 10 years ago, I mean, this wasn't even on the radar, really. Maybe it was on yours, but it was certainly not on the layperson's radar. And I just think how far we've come in the last decade in this area of study. It's fascinating.
Well, that's what I say. Some people are like, oh, genetics is useless. And the other people say they overuse the genetics. And, the human system has to be balanced in this regard. You've got to look at the entire biosphere of the human. The air we breathe can change our genetic expressions, and how we exercise and all of this. I mean, it's a matter of really finding the probabilities, implementing the exercises into that probability, and then testing to see if it's actually doing what we anticipate. That's the key to success in this health world.
Right. And the team at Apiron does it better than anybody else I know. Fantastic. Absolutely. And Dan, we're going to wrap up here. For those of you watching this, we're going to shift over to the Apiron's page or Dan's page?
Yeah, it's Apiron Center for Human Potential page.
Right.
We'll be over there talking about the VIP offer.
Yes, we'll talk about the VIP offer, and we'll talk a little Paleo FX.
All right.
Dan, I will see you in just a couple minutes.
All right.
Everybody else out in Paleo FX world, make sure you check the discussion below. We'll have the link to the DNA kits. And I'm telling you, do yourself a favor, get one and dive in and work with these people. They are fabulous. You will not regret it.
Thanks, Keith.